Hey Sasha,
Hello, how are you?
I'm well, thanks. Thanks for joining another episode of Now Next Later. This one's going to look a little different. We had some technical issues, and so we're just going to chat and share this around. Hope that's okay with
Maybe
everybody.
we should have had AI fix the issues for us.
I know if we only had AI working on our behalf, we wouldn't even need to worry about it.
I mean, they would have predicted we were going to have issues and then provided us with a solution,
That's right. That's right.
right?
Normally I try to mimic Robbie when I log in and get this thing started as the host. We just need AI to be Robbie. We need Robbie
Right?
AI. That's all we need.
Exactly. The AI version of Robbie. We'll make him a little avatar.
Well, it's funny because we were going to talk about our experience at the Housingwire AI Summit this week, but we're just
Yeah.
going to talk about your experience because technology, again, from everything I understand, not AI related, caused me to not be able to get a flight or find an alternative flight or make it to Dallas in time to be there with you. So this is going to be me trying to catch up on what I missed.
Yeah.
Thankfully, you were there.
Yeah, definitely. And like as true to my nature, I would have loved to have stayed in the sessions the entire time, but I definitely had some meetings and socializing outside. So I didn't get all of the data, but got plenty. I don't know how people sit still for that long.
Indeed, it was jam packed. And credit
It was.
to Housing Wire for bringing everybody together, but then they do such a great job promoting it after
Yeah.
the fact, and so many of us that care about these things and are trying to move the industry forward share. So I got a lot of good feedback from other folks that were there, and obviously we'll talk about it today. So we're not going to concentrate entirely on the summit. I think what we'd like to do here is apply our in fact, with this one, Sasha, I wanted to kind of propose that we do now and next because
Yeah.
AI is so dramatic
Yeah.
and the later could be anything, candidly. Like we don't even know. So we're just
Yeah.
going to stick to now and next. And in the next 30 minutes, try to walk through what we heard as well as put that together for what's valuable for you. If you're making decisions right now in your organization, what to invest in, how to invest. Obviously, this is a hot topic. I'm sure every board, every CEO is asking, their teams for what's our plan, what's our strategy, how are we going to look at this? A, we don't want to be left in the dust, but B, we don't want to spend too much on something that's not going to have a direct impact on our business. So
Yeah.
how do we look at it? So those are some big questions, and
Yeah.
they're perfect. Big questions are perfect for now, next, later. So with that, one of the things I thought we would start with, I just kind of wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about the two or three things that stood out as takeaways
Yeah.
among everything you heard that you'd identify as say, okay, those are the things I'd like to make sure all my clients or all my business partners, our industry understand.
Yeah. So if I think about at like top of the waves, I think the three things that stood out most, and this is going to sound very broad, but I think it helps to set the context for our conversation. One is there was a lot of talk about where do you start, right? And it is very early days for AI, and there's a lot of debate on what's AI versus, traditional automation, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think it helps to consider where you want to start so that you have, let's call it a playground or a sandbox, right, for the tech folks out there to go think about where it might make sense, what tools you might want to leverage, whether or not you want to build or buy, et cetera. And one of the speakers mentioned thinking about it from a borrower experience, a employee experience, or maybe just general operational area. And I think a lot of people are going to lean, our poor employees, it's not just culture matters. I think people are going to lean more towards operational, which does impact employees, or borrower, which also impacts employees.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it'll be interesting to see, but I really do believe people will go kind of either more borrower centric, like you think about realtors talking about using ChatGPT on the front end a lot with customers, and then operational, you think about companies. You and I both work for closing companies that are already starting to use AI. You've got a lot of underwriting scenarios that are starting to use AI, et cetera. So I do think pick a playground, pick an area. And, maybe do a little bit of both, have creative open space with it, but also put it into the bigger picture of your strategy for, we talked about this multiple times now. Who are you as a company? Where are you headed? What is your holistic strategy, and how does technology fit into that? So that way it's, both a playground where you're experimenting and having fun with it and learning about it, but you're also applying it in a way that fits into that bigger strategy. So one is kind of like choose the area and help figure out how it fits. The second is somebody, and I think it was the chief AI officer, which I can't believe they even have that role. I'm impressed, at HUD, who mentioned, maybe think about at this moment in time, because AI is so new, instead of return on investment, return on experience. And I really liked that framing, because I think it does tee up how you're going to think about the return you're getting, especially given it is early days and you're going to have a lot of errors and you're going to have stuff that doesn't work and doesn't make sense. And you're going to have to try it. Like the computer's probably going to get smarter than you. So you're going to have to try and make sense of it. Right. And so I think that's a really interesting way to frame things, from a set expectations of, this isn't going to be a silver bullet home run out of the gate. You're going to get all this value the way that you're used to. You're going to gain so much knowledge and power from the experience and what it's going to do to the experience, whether for your borrower, your employees, et cetera, over time. And then I think the third one would be, kind of full circle back to the first, just start. You got to start somewhere. Again, I think a lot of people are debating on what is truly AI versus what is not. We can talk about that a little bit more. I'm still learning about it, truthfully. But also, there's a community of people that are all in the same boat, right? So, like, don't be scared to reach out. And I think I love that about Housingwire, which was bringing so many walks of life together to start to have those conversations around, what have I started with? Where am I in that process, and what's next? And I think it's really healthy for us to continue to have those conversations, share what we're learning along the way, and help each other out on this journey, because it is definitely going to be a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah, that's excellent. Those are tremendous. I mean, I think I'm already starting to get a sense we'll probably need like part two of this conversation, because one of the things that you just said that stood out to me, and maybe I'm jaded, but I feel like there's a lot of, I want AI for AI's sake. I don't know what I'm going to do with it. I don't really care. I just have to say I'm doing it to keep up with the Joneses, so to speak. And, I was almost thinking, I'm tipping my hand a bit here, but at the beginning of my career, I've always enjoyed writing. I've always enjoyed, as I know you do too. And there was a lot of companies where, when I first started my career, it was like, we need a blog. Great.
Yeah,
Why do you need a blog? Well, everyone has
because
a
it's the
blog. We
new
need a
hot
blog.
trendy thing to do.
And I was like, well, if you don't know what you're going to say in your blog, it's going to expose you, because
Yeah.
it's actually, I always held the position, and I was in the minority here, but I always held the position, it's worse to have a blog that doesn't say anything than to have a blog, than to not have one at all. And I almost feel like what you just described, between, return on investment and experience, if I'm not capable of creating an experience today, and I want to, is AI going to fill that gap for me? Like, am I like, I just don't see companies who have very little time, effort, or energy toward creating a consumer experience today being like, well, thankfully, this is going to, and maybe it will, maybe I'm wrong, and AI is just going to clear that gap. And all of a sudden, you haven't created an experience of note or differentiation yet, but this is going to do it for you. I would be very surprised if a year from now we're like, oh, AI solved everybody's experience problem.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you. And I love that idea of relating it back to the blog. It's interesting. Somebody, and I want to say, Jason from UWM was one of the first speakers, and I think he might have been the keynote. And so he was up there for a while and he talked about a lot. And I was like, I can't write fast enough. But one of the things he compared this to is internet, like how internet changed the world, right? AI
Mm-hmm.
is, but like it wasn't, everyone thought like the .com, like overnight was gonna be like everything changes, and it didn't. And to your point, not having a purpose and an intention behind it makes it messier and not necessarily as impactful. And the other imagery that he used that I really liked was like, think about where we are with technology in general in mortgage. Like, he's like, you have this like thing that you create, and let's call it a bionic arm, right? And you're like trying to make it fit onto the rest of a human body, and the human body's rejecting it because you're not thinking about the rest of the human body that needs to now be bionic as well. And
Hmm.
I really loved that metaphor and that imagery for like where we are, because we are just trying to like stitch a bunch of random technology and what I would consider more true automation rather than AI together right now, and it's still not working. And in part because we're layering it on broken process. And so if we don't fix the process, if we don't have the right strategy, we don't have the right goals, we don't know what it is we're going to do, then yeah, just checking the box is never going to be a fulfilling scenario.
Yeah, it's almost like when you're, let's say, switching your LOS to, I'll just use Encompass as the example.
Sure.
Well, Encompass has, I don't know, somebody will correct me because I'm sure someone out there knows, but like 13,000 data fields, right?
Yeah.
All kinds of different customizable workflows, milestones, tabs, plugins, vendors, etc. The iterations are countless. So you're going to get Encompass out of the box and then be like, well, give me my workflow. It's like, well, Encompass doesn't do that. You have to hand the blueprints over to your administrator or a consultant or someone to set up what you want. If you don't know what you want, the LOS
Yeah.
isn't going to give it to you. We're
Yeah.
almost back in that same exact discussion again with AI. It's like if you don't have the blueprint, you could ask AI for a blueprint.
Right.
Aren't we all just going to end up with the same experience then? Because AI is just going to give you what it knows. And if
Right.
you say what's the best experience, everyone else is going to ask what the best experience is. Everybody's going to end up with a chatbot
Yeah.
that talks to your loan officer or talks to your consumer. Why?
Right.
Because nobody knows what else to do.
Yeah.
That's what AI says is the best or easiest or most uh, the best place to start. So I like your comment, which is, hey, if you've got to be able to start somewhere, and that should map to all the things we've been mentioning. What's the strategy, right? What's your differentiator if you have one, and then pick, you know.
Yeah. It's interesting. There was a group of us that went to dinner after the summit, and I'm going to start name dropping, so people will have to watch later.
That's
But
right.
Taylor Stork brought out his phone and was like, I can like literally take a mortgage app on my phone from ChatGPT. And all of us at the table were like, I mean, I guess it makes sense that that would be available, but like, no, never tried it. And so he literally just tells ChatGPT to do it, and it starts going through it. And it was cool that that exists, right? Like, it's neat that we've never had that before, but then it's like, okay, well, that's great that it tells you like what the fields are that need to be filled out for a mortgage app, but then what? Like, what do you do
Yeah,
with it? Right. So it's the same kind of concept of like, it's cool that this ability and capabilities are there, but if we don't, to your point, have strategy and direction, like it's just going to sit there and be a cool thing. It's like the new toy that you buy that sits on the shelf that your kid never uses. And then you're like, great, on to the next one. Right. So,
that's right.
and AI is a little bit different in the sense that it is truly trying to mimic human intelligence. And so we have to train it differently. Like old school programming is so different in my mind compared to like training something to operate like a very complex thing such as a human brain.
Hmm.
And so I think, when you consider that it's going to be even more complex than the type of technology we've worked with before, that means you've got to simplify even more what it is that you want it to do out of the gate. Because you're going to have to give it time, and you're going to have to feed it a lot of data, and you're going to have to experiment and adjust and course correct to get it to truly be able to function like a human would.
Yeah. And on that point, I mean, I think there's a real challenge, and let's use the ChatGPT interactive application as an example.
Yeah.
The real challenge is where and when do you put that makes any sense to anybody and that fits the entire landscape. I was having a really interesting conversation with someone recently. We weren't even really talking about AI that much at all, but what we were talking about was if a consumer had all of the information about their own application,
Mhm.
let's say, this is a perfect use case, which is the ChatGPT. Let's say individual went to ChatGPT, originated their own application, had it,
Mhm.
right? And then let's say even there was a platform out there to let them run AUS, let's say.
Sure.
Now they know I'm approved and they know for how much. Turns out you cannot actually shop for that application unless you're truly on your own. Because if the platform itself tried to sell that as a lead, you have a RESPA violation, right? Because that's actually payment for the placement of it, or you need to be licensed as a mortgage broker. So I'm using that as an example to say, even if we empowered consumers, which I believe we should, with all
Yeah.
of their own data, which I believe we should, and had them be stronger and more powerful than the lender, meaning they should be able to choose whoever they want because they actually know how valuable they are, we would still have antiquated regulations and
Yeah.
antiquated systems that couldn't
Yeah.
accommodate that power. So
Yeah.
it does feel like we're stuck in a position where we have a lot more enthusiasm and passion for change,
Yeah.
and we're still not able to like really energize our innovators around solutions, and
Yeah.
we're not sure what to do next, is how I kind of interpreted that conversation.
Yeah, and I think as per usual, there's always the right desire, the right intent, and then like kind of the wonky application of, right?
Yep. Yeah.
And so I mean, I don't, maybe other people knew, and I'm just like super late to the party, but I didn't realize that HUD had set up an actual function for AI. And like I said, had hired a chief AI officer and said, hey, we've got to start looking at, regulation and, requirements and kind of like a container that we can set around this so that you can go forward and leverage it
Hmm.
in ways that it should be used rather than limiting its ability because we have things that, to your point, are antiquated and it would be counterintuitive, right? And so it's like almost a cart before the horse or chicken before the egg in the sense of probably should have cleaned up some of these things that didn't really make sense and don't really apply in 21st century now anyway. But hey, if AI is what lights the spark and is the catalyst to help us make some of those changes that can holistically downstream have positive impact, then so be it.
That's right. Let's dig in a little bit on that, right? So, what I interpreted the operational piece that you described a minute ago to relate here is we have a big disconnect, I think, when we speak about AI in terms of automation and operational efficiency,
Right.
which is what is it actually doing? And what I mean
Yeah.
by that is, my first question always when I hear we've got AI for this, or this, it's usually those like frequently asked questions. I said customers or originators or real estate agents can ask it any question in my
Sure.
system 24/7. Or I've heard more and more about product and pricing engines. Hey, I can have it just running constant calculations for a product and
Mm-hmm.
pricing engine. And then we had what I think you were referring to, which is it helps me ingest, collect, or otherwise read data, usually off a document or something like that. And I think in all three of those cases, the key is it making a decision?
Right.
The answer I keep coming back to, or the question, the answer I keep hearing when I ask the question is like, no, it's not. And I think the belief is, well, it either will be soon, or we got to be really careful that it doesn't, because that's the regulatory environment, consumer protection. Obviously, we have to be careful of that. But the reality is, I haven't yet heard of really any decision making.
Yeah.
It's all like, and the best examples I've seen are I've ingested 10,000 documents. How many of them have this? Or where can
Right.
I find this? And then it can just go find
Yeah.
data within the 10,000 documents better, stronger, faster. So
Yeah.
if you buy loans, if you onboard customers, if you have a bunch of accounts, being able to ask it, how many of my accounts have this, right? It's almost like a better BI at this point.
Sure.
And then if you apply that within the process, you can collect information off of a doc package faster. You can ask it questions about a doc package faster. Am I kind of on point that like that's what we've seen? Is that the now of what we've seen with AI, or did you hear that that's actually no, we're not even there yet? That's next,
Yeah.
or we're about to step into that world?
No, I mean, I think it's a mix. Some people are not there now, but I think some are, right? And we
Hmm.
know that we've worked at companies where that is the case. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't look, I get into this like, do you really need to be right or wrong? Like some people like to be
Yeah,
more precise about these things. I think it's, in my mind, personal opinion, smart to be honest about where we are, which is that we are exploring, we are experimenting. And so, those that get up in arms that say, like, well, that's not really AI. Okay, fine, maybe not, but it's the step towards, right?
yeah,
Or it's part and parcel. And to your points earlier, both in our ability to understand it and use it, but also the regulation environment that we're in, it probably will take time before we're actually doing it in a proper fashion, quote unquote. But I do think people are at that point where it's pushing automation to get better. And then there are elements of decision making that are available. It might not be the ultimate decision maker, but it
that's right.
is starting to move towards, right? Like if you have an automated underwriting system that can say, like right now, probably mostly just automating a lot of stuff that's manual. But at some point, if you can have it legitimately say, here's my rendered decision, and a human can go back and verify and go, yep, 10 times out of 10, it's rendering the right decision, then you start to get a level of confidence in it. And now maybe we really talk about allowing it to truly be the replacement for rather than an augmentation of.
Hmm.
But I think that takes time. And so I think that the now is what you described. And the next is like, how do we get to a point where we trust it fully? And I don't know how quickly we get there to all the nuances that we've talked about already. But again, got to start, got to keep
Yeah.
trying and playing. And I think there are, other examples in the meantime that we can be maybe more experimental with, like the predictive side, right? The more
Hmm.
data we feed it, hopefully the smarter it does get, and it can like help us predict where we're going to run into errors that will help us realize, hey, we have a system breakdown, or we're missing key data, or we have a process breakdown, and maybe it helps point us in the direction to be smarter. And I would say that's a step above what general BI used to do. Like you still had to have a human in there intervening to get that intelligence out. So if we can get this AI to actually do it without having manual intervention, that would be cool. I also heard, and this I like have a somewhat visceral reaction to this one, an example of using ChatGPT as a bird dog for sales, in the sense of you have loan officers, or maybe
Yeah.
even a real estate agent or someone doesn't want to pick up the phone and have that initial conversation. And so like just have AI, chat with them and like get the information. And then when it's really time for a conversation, boom, it goes to that person's phone, and real estate agent, loan officer, otherwise answers and like continues the more human aspect of that relationship. There's a part of me that's like, y'all are lazy, like, come on, do your job. But there's another part of me that's like, well, I mean, how many of us like on a weekend are tired and like, I don't want to talk to a human because I don't know if I'm ready to talk to a human yet. And so maybe I would just rather, chat with something that's as close to a human and I don't know the difference. And then if I'm ready to have that conversation, I can say yes. And if I'm not, I can say, hey, let me wait on that and I'll come back to it. So then that part's kind of cool. So I don't know. I'm
I
mixed bag on that one.
I think that's a perfect example of the dilemma, right? So I'll give a shout out to our mutual friend John Hill. His comment to me was, "Why would I want something that does what I'm supposed to do if
Right.
that's my whole value proposition? I get it
Right.
to have something do something I don't want to have to do because that's
Yeah.
not my value proposition. So I've got the machine over here doing it.
Yeah.
But if it is my actual value proposition, do I really want to outsource that? On the other hand, you cannot scale a person, and then it's like dot 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 until now, question mark, like you
Right.
can actually kind of scale a person now. So it used to be, hey, I'm
Yeah.
only one real estate agent, I'm only one mortgage loan originator, I can't scale myself, I'll try to teach my team. And teams, became, I would say, probably like a 30-year trend. I've got my team, and then you look at the best originators in the country have very well-oiled machines that are
Yeah.
teams. And so now the question is like, can you scale even further, right?
Yeah.
Can you have the number one originator in the country? Can Sean Benojian can become like his team can
Cloned.
now scale at scale, right? Like, what are we dealing with here? So I think that's the dilemma: is I
Yeah.
don't want to outsource my own value proposition, but
Right.
maybe I can scale myself in this really unusual but powerful way.
Yeah.
So fascinating example of a dilemma there.
Yeah.
And then I think the last thing we're hearing is that we're not quite there yet on predictive, but
Yeah.
predictive analytics, predictions and guardrails, making sure that there aren't that the human kind of did everything they were supposed to do, didn't forget something or didn't leave out an option or a possibility, still feels to me to be next, but we're really close on
Yeah.
next there.
Yeah.
So would you say then, I'm going to try to summarize what I've heard. It You have to understand your business enough to know where you're going to get the benefit. And
Yeah.
then you have to know that getting started means you won't have an immediate return, that it's going to be experiential. And that word you used, I think, in a great way because it means both
Right.
experiential to your team. And then also, you just have to get experience with it to really refine it to
Exactly.
make it valuable. So, from everything we're hearing, the now it sounds like is there's no substitute for knowing your business, and then
Yeah.
you got to apply this in a way that gives you some lead time. And this industry has never really been good about making those long-term investments. This will be a real challenge for some of our listeners to be like, I got to just do this if I
Yeah.
don't want to be left behind. And what we're saying is we're still in the do this to take control of your business,
Right.
but very soon it's going to be you have to do this to defend yourself.
Yeah.
And so right now we're encouraging everybody to get on that timeline. Did I
Yeah.
summarize that? Does that sound right?
I think so. And I think the only thing, and it's going to sound a little bit counter to what you said, but I just am mindful of it because I've run into it before when I've been on the tech side, selling tech into areas of the country where it's just not prevalent still.
Yep.
Is you do have to meet your customers where they're at. And so
Mhm.
depending on who you are and who you serve, AI
Yep.
might be something that like UWM, they've got not only the resources to do it, right? And the volume and the business and the size and that, right? All of it. Like, so they're building a lot of this on their own, and that's fantastic. And that's what they want to do, and that's where they want to be. And they're going to attract the customers that want to be on that journey with them. There will be other folks that are in areas of the country that are not ready for that yet, and that's okay. And so I think for those, I would say, still do it, still find an area to play with, because I do think whether we like it or not, the world will eventually go this way. And so better to start now versus, to your point, be behind the game. But you might throttle a little bit different depending on your business model and who
Yeah.
your customers are, so that again, you can meet them where they're at. And it might be that if your customers are more tech forward, perhaps you are bringing the borrower experience forward more. Whereas if they're not, you might be doing more operational things for yourself so that you can be more efficient on the inside of your business, and not necessarily have to worry about it with your customers if they're not ready for it. So I think, again, it's counter, but also complementary to what you said. It's just kind of like, know your audience, know your customers, meet them where they're at, and then figure out where it makes the most sense for your business to start to dig in and play.
Right on. Well, we come back to the same themes, and I think that's a really good sign because if you can really be honest about where you are, and
Yeah.
then I think we've probably used this word every single episode, and we probably will as long as we talk, which is adoption, right? That's what you're
Yeah.
saying. You're like, if you make really good decisions and you can drive adoption, you're going to have a long-term future, in this process, given what we know about technology in this industry and about adoption sort of across the country. So
Yeah. I also find
hopefully,
it a little bit fascinating that we're in a world where we're going to be asked to train a computer to operate more like a human, which the difference maker there is our psyche,
yeah,
right?
right.
And our personality and our ability to process that information and make those decisions based on more than just data, like based on emotion, based on
Yeah.
experience. And so here's an area where we haven't always done that great with humans. So perhaps use this as an opportunity to lean into your culture and to your people and really understand the psyche behind why humans do or don't do things, and how you can continue to improve that within your organization to adopt and accept change while you're also looking at technology, being trained the same way.
Yeah, I would love to pick that up as our teaser for a conversation to come, because what I'm really curious about is, you mentioned the word at the outset, so we'll end on it, which is experience.
Yeah,
We know humans are storytellers. You and I believe very deeply in the human experience and
absolutely.
sharing the human experience as professionals and as friends, colleagues, family members, everything. And so I think you're exactly right. We are going to have to solve for how technology does things that it should do and does not extract the experience and the connection that we're all so thirsty for, that we're all so desperate for. Right now, my research leading into this summit that I wasn't able to use was big tech is not making money on this. Big tech is foreshadowing to their investors that they are losing money on this right now, but it's for a good reason, right? So
Yeah,
Microsoft, Google, Meta, they're telling their investors, hey, look, it's gonna cost us
yeah,
this year, maybe even next year. Don't hit me with criticism or sell my stock. Don't hit
yeah.
me with that, because I'm actually investing in the future. And so why would mortgage be any different? We have to think about it the way you just described, and make sure that as we grab these tools and put them into a fragmented business, we're also realizing that we can leapfrog some of the things we've struggled with if we do it right. And if we don't,
Yeah.
we won't. It'll get more expensive. It'll get slower. We'll still have these complaints 3 years from now, 5 years from now. But if we do, we do have an opportunity to leapfrog, and somebody may. And so we're
Yeah.
here to
No,
monitor
I
that.
love that. And thematically, I like the idea of the leapfrog into an upcycle too, right? Like you
Yeah,
said earlier, yeah,
now's the
maybe
time.
right now things are slow and you might not need the support, but when the market does come back, I mean, I'm going to pick on John Hill. If he had the opportunity to make more money because technology could take a piece of what he does and do it faster, I won't say better, John, but faster, and give you more opportunities that you then pick up and then do what you do best. I'm pretty sure he's going to say yes to that because I know that man likes to make money. And I think same thing for loan officers and real estate agents, right? It's like when life does get busy again, and it will, in a different way. I think a lot of people are working hard on their business, but when the volume picks up and now you're just trying to manage that workload, having some of these things in place could make life a heck of a lot more efficient and better. And again, allow you to double down on what you do best, which is really more in that middle to later life cycle of the relationship, not necessarily the early stages, aside from that initial connection point.
That's right. That's a great way to put what's next for this industry. We believe you can do all of these exciting things, improve your business, lower your costs, make more money, and find you have a happier consumer, you have more customers, you have more engaged team members. We don't believe these things are mutually exclusive. We believe you should be able to have a wonderful workplace that treats consumers better than anyone else in the industry and makes a ton of money off of your innovation. And so hopefully that's what we're here for on Now Next Later. I can't wait to talk about what's next. I think, Sasha, that was a great conversation about what's now, and obviously we'll pick this back up next week and keep talking about it.
I love it. It was fun.
Thanks. Have a great
Yeah,
day. Talk to you
you
soon.
too. Sounds great.
Bye.
Bye.